Yeah, not directly AI, but I've just picked up a new tool that I started using that helps you manage your LinkedIn inbox and sort of takes it out of LinkedIn. And I just started using it a couple of days ago, but it's a 22-year-old developer in LA, him and a couple of friends. They've built this product. The UI and UX on it is unbelievable. And it's like, it's so easy. If you've got the technical skills and capabilities to do it and you get the product market fit right and you have the timing right, then it's very easy to grow something from nowhere, isn't it? And that's why being a startup entrepreneur is so exciting, because it's always, what's the unicorn idea and can I get it to market at the right time and get it to the right people?
Yeah, 100%. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's all about usability.
Welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. Microsoft Mentors is designed to lift the lid on the journeys of the most successful leaders in the Microsoft partner ecosystem. Every week, through candid conversations with founders, business owners, and technology thought leaders, we explore their strategies, grit, and lessons behind their growth and how they're building competitive advantage for the future. These are the untold stories and practical lessons from leaders who are defining success in Azure, AI, data, app innovation, and security. Our mission is simple: to tell partner stories at scale and create impactful Microsoft conversations. Hello and welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. So this week I'm really excited to be joined by Richard Conway. So Richard Conway is the founder of Elastacloud and now new group CTO of Acora. Is that sort of a good description for your day-to-day these days, Richard?
Yeah, that's spot on, Ollie. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. So for anyone that's not listened to the podcast before, Microsoft Mentors, especially this series, is all about talking to leaders and founders within the Microsoft partner ecosystem and just trying to, I guess, see what lessons we can learn from these sorts of conversations. So I guess to start off with, it'd be really good to understand a bit more about sort of where you've come from, Richard. So something new that I want to try today is, can you, if possible, do you think you can sum up your career journey in a tweet? So what's the tweet these days? 3 sentences. Can you sum up who you are and what you do in 3 sentences?
I'm literally speechless. I think you're the first person that's ever asked me that. And I am so verbose. You've totally asked the wrong person. I was about to waffle endlessly. What a challenge. Not content with corporate life. Moved into startups as soon as possible. Had a few bumps in the road and a few successes, and ended up on the up.
There you go. I don't even know if it's called a tweet these days. Anyway, what do you call it now? Is it an X? Is it called Xing?
Something like that. But yeah, God, if I heard that has no context over the last 15 years of Elastacloud. So there's so many nuances in the story.
Absolutely. And yeah, luckily we've got more than 3 sentences. We've got a good session to dive into a bit more detail. So if we wind it all the way back to Richard coming into the careers market, the jobs market, what did your early days look like in tech?
Yeah, so I think I followed a pretty traditional route, actually. In what I studied, very very early on, I knew what I wanted to do. I meet so many founders now that have had exactly the same journey, right? That sat in front of a ZX81 or a BBC Micro, and had like a parent who was a science geek, a science nerd, or an engineer, and that was pretty much my journey, and so I started my first job in the City of London, in Deutsche Bank, and whenever you get typecast in an industry, you tend to hop around within that industry. You either handle it really well, or you just go, "This is not for me." And I couldn't find my place. I tried a number of things, being a perm, being contractor. And it was only really after about 10 years of working for different companies that I truly established that I wanted to work for myself. In between, I'd worked for a really good startup. I'd moved on. I was like 26 years old, and I came in as the director of development. So I had a Visual C++ background. I moved into .NET very, very early through the alphas. Not that you can say alphas these days. And I was actually the existing CTO of this startup was going to leave and didn't leave in time. It left me in an untenable position, and it was my first understanding that it doesn't matter how good a product set is, if a startup runs out of money and doesn't have customers, then that's it. So, but I got a taste for it then, and I had 5 years of hopping around the city again, until in 2006 I started becoming a serial startup person.
Yeah, and sort of in that sort of 10-year period, then was that mainly working in sort of development type roles then within financial services in the city? Was that sort of the sector that you sort of landed in?
It was, yeah. I mean, I had the odd stint in telecommunications, and also energy, but always on the finance side. So, like I say, it's very, very easy to be typecast in a role.
Yeah.
And I just found I wasn't really enjoying what I was doing. But during that time, I was really, really bucking up my skills. I wrote, because it was the way that I learned. I had to be, and I think some people are like this, where in order to really be top of your game, you have to work out how to teach other people. And like my expressionism at the time, from about 1999 to 2003, was to write books. So I wrote about 8 Rocks books, 8 Press books, Charles Rivers books, all around .NET. At the time, I was absolutely obsessed by an author called Bruce Schneier, who was he was just a cryptography god, and so everybody was reading his books, Applied Cryptography, and I was just obsessed with this. So I was publishing open source on SourceForge. I was writing books, blog articles, magazine articles, all in my spare time. But it really, really gave me a focus and a love for, all things crypto at that time.
Yeah. And do you think, it's interesting that, you mentioned earlier about founders being on a similar journey. I've spoken to a few founders that have, been down a similar route where they've, got a passion for a particular technology area and have become an author in that space. Do you think with where we're at now with tech and, where we've been over the last few years with public cloud and the developments in that space, and obviously now with AI, do you think there's still a place for those sort of technical know-how sort of for dummies and for expert physical books, or do you think it's a kind of a dying product because the technology's moved so fast?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I mean, none of the big computer publishing houses are out of business yet, so I think that's a good sign. But yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, I think now software is moving so fast that print can't keep up with it. But I still use reference guides. I still read some books within my community, and I'll download them to my Kindle. So I think it's just a different form factor now. But I still think that there's a strong place for authors.
Yeah, and are you a fan of physical hard books? Looking at your background, what you've got there, do you like having paper in your hand as well as the Kindle?
Comics, a few role-playing games as well. So yeah, I am a full-on nerd.
Yeah, and to be fair, I'm not an avid reader, but I'm semi-professional reader, and I dip in and out of my Kindle, but I just can't get hooked to my Kindle. Whereas if I've got a book and I can see and I can feel how far through I am in it, then I keep going back for it. With a Kindle, it's so sort of abstract in my drawer somewhere that I find that if I'm going for a book on my Kindle, I only get part way through. Whereas if I've got a physical book, I know that I'm going to get to the end of it.
It's true, isn't it? It's true. You like to know where you are in something, and it's really, really easy when you've got a physical book.
Yeah. Cool. So you sort of went through that journey in the city, kind of got a bit of a feeling that maybe it wasn't where you wanted to be long term, had a bit of a feeling to what it looked to work up in a startup, and then you mentioned sort of then became a serial startup entrepreneur. So what did that look like? How many sort of iterations of different businesses you've been through? Which ones worked? Which ones didn't? Good to know.
Yeah, so I spent a couple of years building with a group of other people the very, very early stages, and it was because I was interested in crypto. And you're attracted to like-minded people, and you just find each other. It was an early stage passport startup. We wrote some great software, and we were funded at the start, but we just couldn't make enough money. There were too many players in the market, like 3M and other big companies that had huge amounts to invest in this space, and ended up building out all of the the border control, those automated gates.
Yeah.
But it was a great time. I got to be on the ground, understanding all of these passport protocols, how you had things like JPEG 2000 images, and to do facial recognition, and scanning fingerprints, irises, all of these things which were in this protocol. And we managed to break this down in software, built up our own certificate servers, and all these things that I'd wanted to do for ages. I got to write from scratch with a small team, and so it was a real experience. We made money, we just didn't make enough, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a story we're going to see repeated quite a lot over the next few years, isn't it? Where lots of businesses will be trying to enter and scale and make a quick billion out of the AI market. But it's going to be so saturated, and is already so saturated, that there's going to be lots of businesses that do well, and there'll be other businesses that just don't quite cut through, unfortunately. But that's the nature of the game.
It is. But I think this is for the pickings. I'm looking around at some of the unicorns like Cursor, and it just takes very, very simple ideas executed very, very well, and you've offloaded all of the hard work onto somebody else's software, right? It's billions of pounds worth of investment in LLMs, and you're leveraging that. The rest of it is just window dressing,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, not directly AI, but I've just picked up a new tool that I started using that helps you manage your LinkedIn inbox, and sort of takes it out of LinkedIn. And I just started using it a couple of days ago, but it's a 22-year-old developer in LA, him and a couple of friends. They've built this product. The UI and UX on it is unbelievable. And it's like, it's so easy. If you've got the technical skills and capabilities to do it, and you get the product market fit right, and you have the timing right, then it's very easy to grow something from nowhere, isn't it? And that's why being a startup entrepreneur is so exciting, because it's always, what's the unicorn idea, and can I get it to market at the right time and get it to the right people?
Yeah, 100%. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's all about usability. If you want to use a tool, then, and you keep using a tool, that it's going to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that sort of journey of startups, when did Elastacloud, when did the Elastacloud idea start, I guess, to start with, and then when did it first launch?
Yeah, so I think around about 2009. So actually early on, I did another startup, which was around tracking ships. It was much more engineering focused. We'd written something that controlled a machine which would like evacuate oil from bilge and ballast tanks of a ship, and give a report on this. And at the time, Azure didn't exist, but I built a hub and spoke in AWS, and I got a taste of how easy it was, because at the time, everyone had a server in a host, generally within the US, and so it was a complete departure from that. That I could just spin something up with through Elastic Compute. There was a plugin in Firefox at the time, and
that's a blast from the past, Firefox.
And it just enabled me to control virtual machines, and I never had that capability So I had a team that was working with me building this workflow software, and we were using like large, long wave 30-meter aerials to pick up AIS ship transmissions. And we were testing this, tracking them. My team at the time was based in Austria, so the test rig was sitting on the by the Danube, and we were tracking all of the ships that were going past. And it was really, really interesting. It was again, it was not a success, but you keep trying, and and then 2009 hit, and Microsoft released Azure, and in a very, very traditional Microsoft way, they went PaaS first, with this idea of web roles, worker roles. You had a whole bunch of AWS folk that were from Microsoft backgrounds that were already using AWS, that were asking for VMs. So Microsoft introduced this idea of a VM role, and and so on and so forth. And I knew at that point in time that they were going to start putting significant investment behind this, in the same way that they did with .NET. I think I was in the startup that I was in 2001 for a brief period. We were working with Microsoft on a product called Hailstorm, .NET MyServices. It's actually a very, very early version of a private cloud, but it was misdirected. It was based on like a set of services, so that you would subscribe to this global contact service or a global calendar service. But it was actually years ahead of its time. All of the things that we do and know now and consider, Microsoft were thinking about as far back as 2001. So one of the key things that I picked up from that was a set of contacts in Microsoft. And at the time, I started writing blogs on Azure, like 2009, 2010, and there was nobody that was really talking about it because it was so new. And that's where I met Andy Cross, my co-founder in Elastacloud. And we were writing tools, we were open sourcing them, we were writing blogs online. We decided to meet up outside the virtual world, and ended up working through a third party to do some post-sales support for Microsoft. Found out that nobody was really using Azure. You had all the big consultancies like Logica and a few others, but there wasn't really a customer take up. So we decided a couple of things, that we'd form a user community because there wasn't one in the UK. So we formed the UK Azure user group. We did it primarily to bring a lot of learnings and to grow a community, which we have done successfully. And we decided to create the company at the same time. And the idea behind Elastacloud was to do all of the hard bits that other people didn't want to do, because everybody was talking about web and SharePoint on Azure. So we thought, you've got infinite scale on the cloud, right? We were experts in distributed computing, so we decided to focus solely on HPC, on high performance computing. We started working with Microsoft. I refreshed the contacts that I had in 2001, and we found out that we were actually the only consultancy that was really interested in looking at the length and breadth of all the things that you could do in Azure in the UK. And so what ended up happening was we ended up being seconded to teach all of the partners, like really, really early on, about Azure. We were running around mentoring with some of the Microsoft guys. There was Steve Plank, who I think is still there. Must be like coming up for 30 years in Microsoft. And he was getting rooms. They were getting rooms in hotels for like 200, 250 people a time. They had to literally turn people away and put second events on and third events for these full day sessions, and they were packed out. And so Andy and I used to help at this. Then we were spending a lot of time in Reading, teaching partners, and we were given a budget ourselves to extend, because Microsoft literally couldn't keep up with demand in training. And so we effectively started off as a training company just because we knew more than anybody else. But then as a result of that, Microsoft started using us for all of these customers in an incubation capacity, so that they could onboard them onto Azure. And we would, at this time, over the period of a year, we probably met about 200 different businesses. We got thrust into gaming. So, for example, if you look at the early Hitman releases, that was us. We built the analytics back end, but it was all by virtue of the fact that we went through certain routes in what was then called Developer Platform Evangelism, DPE, which doesn't quite exist anymore. The developers not forefront in Microsoft's minds these days, not in the same capacity that they were. But it really, really afforded us the ability to just navigate through Microsoft UK, make a lot of contacts, whilst at the same time, really understanding how we could build up the community, but just in a really grandiose way. So we'd start putting on conferences. We landed a conference in 2012. We had like 1,200 people turn up. It was like crazy numbers. We hired out these cinemas, and we had Scott Guthrie turn up, and the cinema let us down, unfortunately, really, really badly, because the broadband went down, and so
just what you need.
Exactly. So when you're a cloud superstar doing a 3-hour keynote, and then all of a sudden you don't have any internet connectivity, and so it worked in our favor in terms of community building, because everybody in this conference was like literally trailing a Cat 45 cable from the projection room, all the way to the front, where Scott Guthrie was doing these demos, and we'd connect for 30 seconds, and then it would, the signal couldn't attenuate, so then it would die, and he was just absolutely fantastic. You really feel that you've got somebody that's so polished in how to talk to developers when you're with him. And so every single time after that he came to the UK, he'd come and speak for the user group. Mark Svinovich did the same thing. And so in the early years, we really put a lot of energy into building up that community and ensuring that the UK had a strong presence in everything Microsoft.
And I think if you look at, so what year did you say you set up the community? 2012 was it?
2010.
2010, yeah. So if you look fast forward 15 years now and look where the Azure user group community is now in the UK, and it's really mature and really thriving. If you think about most major cities or counties will have or do have a user group, and through these conversations, speak to people, lots of different people that are involved in them, and the value that people can get from that, whether you are right on the bleeding edge of cloud and you're pushing that knowledge back into the community, or whether you are an engineer that's maybe getting to play with a little bit of Azure, but really the place that you work in hasn't heavily invested in it. It's a place where you can go and learn and develop, and so many connections, and then so many spin-offs. If you look at like South Coast user group that have then spun off and do the summit, like there's so many interesting things that happen, aren't there, out there, community?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been incredible to see such unprecedented growth, and I think Microsoft have done a great job themselves of in quite difficult times, because they're a business mostly, and so they're focused on profit. They the the developer journey was a little bit uncertain through the middle. Um, they definitely used to support the community more than they do. But I think they've been really consistent in trying to bring a lot of people into things like Future Decoded and then Build and Ignite, and try to scale these across the globe as much as they could, which I think, and that spurned a new generation of different large conferences where people go get their info and network, like SQL Bits and others now, which, because there's been a knock-on effect. And they've realized how significant those kinds of events are, not just their own events, but key events as well, just to ensure that Microsoft has got a very, very strong tech presence. And they'll pull community members into these, MVPs, regional directors, and the like, so they can represent them.
Yeah. And so I guess through that early journey, then it sounds like there's lots of collaboration with Microsoft. Some of it was a bit more on sort of the training and adoption side, the community side. Was there a sort of and obviously you've been through the startup journey a couple of times before. So was there a point in that Elastacloud journey when you and Andy sat down and said, "Oh, this is a key milestone. Actually, this has got legs to really like push and grow, and now we can start investing and hiring and growing"? Was there any sort of point where you realised that actually this one could be the one to grow and scale further?
So I think you get caught up in the moment, because I don't think anybody's seen anything like cloud, right? How fast this happened. You have technology revolutions, but they tend to stop. I think the difference with cloud is that it just didn't stop. Like literally quarter on quarter, it kept redefining itself. Microsoft kept redefining things. AWS, Google keep redefining things, and that's because there's been so much inward investment, because the prize is so large that the number of developers like solely focused on Azure has just been immense, or M365. So I look back at the time in 2010, and there were 2 people in Microsoft's incubation, right? You think about that time, and pretty much everything there from a UK development perspective was all about Nokia, Microsoft Mobile, and you had this thing which we looked at and thought, why is there no investment in this? And I remember there was a point of inflection in 2015 where Microsoft decided to create the idea of a CSA, a cloud solution architect. And they had a practice called the EPG, or the Enterprise Partner Group, and the head of EPG reached out to Andy and myself and said, we need to get CSAs, but we've put this through recruiters and there's nobody doing Azure, and they're telling us that can we put a note out on the user group? And so we put a note out on the user group, and literally this Cardinal Place was packed from the with a whole bunch of people who'd attended the community, who wanted to work for Microsoft at that point, and they'd had the link back to the community. And I think it was really at that was the point of inflection where all of a sudden the recruitment teams would look at this going, oh, actually this is a really significant thing now. Microsoft is investing huge amounts in people. That means that customers are. And I think, so I really saw that 2014, 2015 inflection point where it was just an explosion. And then after that point, there was just nonstop software, software releases. And it was that year as well, or just the end of the year before, that the Hadoop on Azure TAP was released, where Microsoft basically committed to big data. And that was the transition point for us as a business. We knew at that stage that we just wanted to drop everything. We really enjoyed using big data platforms, and we threw ourselves into it, made friends with people in the product team, and just saw that life cycle of, Hadoop on Azure, HD Insight, leading into Databricks and Synapse and Azure Fabric, and all of these varieties of data building blocks. And that's basically how Elastacloud formed. We never really consciously decided that, because I think at our peak we were about 280 people. We never consciously decided that we wanted, such a large collection of people. It was just,
sometimes it happens organically, don't it? And you sort of make decisions to sort of drive towards the next thing that's, that next barrier that you need to cross, or the next, challenge you need to meet, project you need to deliver for a customer. And all of a sudden there's this cumulative effect. If you're in the right time, the right place, all of a sudden you end up with a business that's probably a lot bigger than you thought it ever would be.
Right.
And I guess if you sort of go, continue that track through then to sort of the last few years, and definitely what I'm seeing on my side with where technology is now developing outside of, or in addition to public cloud, and as we move into the new AI era, that whole data platform, big data piece is becoming really a business critical thing that all organizations are having to start looking at so that they can innovate with AI. We're seeing lots of organizations that are investing really heavily in, bringing in or solidifying their data platform teams so that they can get that if they're in the Microsoft world, an Azure data platform that is ready to then really start allowing them to innovate with Azure cognitive services and open AI services on Azure as well. So I guess with that sort of transition, how have you sort of seen the last few years in terms of data and AI being built in as a sort of a co-pairing? And I guess where do you see that going over the next few years?
I thought we'd take a very quick break from this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast, to just talk a little bit about why the podcast and the community that it serves is so important to us as part of our purpose here at Cloud Decisions and the purpose it drives within the wider Microsoft ecosystem. We've been involved here at Cloud Decisions in the Microsoft ecosystem for over a decade now, working with Microsoft partners and businesses with strong alignment to Microsoft technologies and their technology teams to help them to grow and scale their teams in cloud, security, data, and AI. For the past year, we've been working really hard behind the scenes to develop 2 core talent solutions that are built with our customers in mind and enable Microsoft aligned businesses to access the talent they need to grow and scale their teams and ultimately hit their business objectives. We've developed CDX, our own proprietary talent intelligence system that uses custom AI, large language models and natural language processing to enable you as an organization, as a technology leader, to make insight-led technology decisions on all of your permanent hires, and gives us the data that we really need to take your role to market to execute the search. We've also been working with customers here in the UK and in the US through Global Source, our global talent solution that is built to enable organizations to build borderless technology teams for permanent, contract, and flexible outsourced resources. So if you're a Microsoft partner or you are a technology leader within a business with a strong Microsoft technology alignment, and you'd like to know a little bit more about how CDX could fuel your permanent hires or how Global Source could offer you a global talent strategy, then feel free to reach out. And now let's get back to this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that a lot of businesses approached AI without a clear understanding that they need to have a comprehensive data platform in place. And you can't do this in isolation. Everybody uses the expression garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. And, the AI really exemplifies this, because you can get a lot of garbage coming out. So I think there's a few observations that I've seen recently. For the last couple of years, I think, and especially not so much this year, but towards the beginning of last year and the prior year, people were kind of dipping their toes into AI, and there was lots of POCs, and nothing was taken to production, even things that were relatively successful as POCs.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to trust and cost and, how these things are commoditized, and um, a lot of businesses don't understand what the inevitable operating model is going to be as well, because all of the nice service wrappers like Copilot Studio, they weren't available then. So
No.
you can have all these commitments around LLMs, but inevitably you've got to own a piece of software that you've got to feed and water continually, and that costs money over and over and over again, month on month. So I think businesses have been building up that trust, but they've also approached this from the perspective of, I've got this use case, and that's how everybody starts. They either start, I've got this use case, or I want to introduce AI. These are 150 use cases, right? Which one should I do? And you've got to help them. You've got to help them assemble this. So I think the issue with all of this is that there's been a realization that it's not enough just to have a use case and to do a POC in AI. You have to have a dedicated data platform. And I think there's all these new concepts around being able to talk to your data, which is it's almost becoming like a common parlance within, when you have an AI conversation. I want to talk to my data. And they're the kinds of services that are bringing the real value add back to the data platform. So, for example, some of the projects that we're working on, where we'll be utilizing things like Power BI Copilot to come at the last mile, so that somebody can self-serve and build Power BI dashboards, without the need for understanding the how, just explaining this is what I want. So I think I see that it's the BI part, whilst it's not dead. There's self-serve solutions now which are pushing a lot of the effort back into data engineering, which people were just shrugging at like a year ago, didn't want to make the investment. And so now you're coming out the back of these new platforms like Databricks, Fabric, and you're finding out that you can get agent behaviors on top of them, and you can talk to your data. So your data needs to be in a good curated form, But I think it's a real change in position, because now ChatGPT has become part of everybody's consciousness. People, business leaders, IT leaders can easily envisage what they want to see, and they want to understand why they don't get to that state if they can't.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I use ChatGPT daily for sort of work tasks, and it's a multi-billion, probably trillion-pound company that's got all of that power behind it. And then when organisations look to then build their own internal capability against the use case, I guess a lot of the time there's probably an initial fee, and it's like, how do we get the power of something like ChatGPT in our business? Well, it's a different model, and you've got to make sure that the underlying data sets that it's drawing from are allowing the agent side of things, the self-service side of things to pull out the right data sources.
That's right.
So with if we thought about, let's say you've got a business that's still in a fairly traditional state. They're still, maybe got some Azure IaaS VMs. Maybe they've got some SQL on-premise stuff. They've got a little bit of SQL in Azure, and they want to get to, a point of being AI ready as fast as possible. What are those sort of steps that they can go from sort of a fairly traditional posture to getting into a place where they've got a data platform that can go and start, leveraging the capabilities of Azure OpenAI services or Azure Cognitive Services or whatever it might be?
Yeah, another really good question. I think one of the things that I'm beginning to come across. So I'll answer that question. I'll answer that question in two parts. So when we talk about data platform, we're talking about an analytical platform. So people have got their operational databases, they've got applications which they use, they're generating a whole bunch of data, and we're consuming that at a frequency to report back to a business, to do the nice AI agentic thing, whether it's real time, whether we pull this data across in batch whatever frequency, once, twice a day. I think people are beginning to question, now that we've gone to this whole agentic era, people are beginning to question what an operational data platform is. And this is a first for me, because I've had 10 years of building these analytical platforms.
Yeah.
And I'm frequently, so we have customers in various spaces, but there's a change in posture as to, do I actually need this database? And I'm seeing a lot more thought about whether or not event stores, which just generate events, which then go through a whole series of these agentic workflows, all these agents talking to each other to do a whole bunch of jobs, are literally the start and the end of a data flow. And this for me is a complete change in thought, because people are beginning to question like really expensive applications and operational models and ERPs and these sorts of things that are costing like large FTSE 100 businesses tens of millions a year on each of, to vendors. They're beginning to rethink this and say, well, do we actually need this if we've got the scale of the cloud and we can create, these complex agentic workflows? So
yeah. So the data, so in that scenario, then, so the data comes into the workflow. It's worked through the agents. It goes to an output, and then actually, what's the need to hold on to that data long term if you've already got it where you wanted it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, and I think a lot of this, Microsoft was always heading to try to bring the operational data platform and the analytical platform together. They'd written these drivers, for want of a better word, called HTAP, which allowed you to pivot what is row-wise data, so operational data, into a column store, which is analytical data, data warehouse. So I think bringing these two things closer is a bridge that AI can do. And I think that a lot of companies that crack this are going to do very, very well, because most companies now just don't want to have all these disparate systems all over the place. They just want to manage this in one place, so that all of their analytical reporting and all of the events that they generate from their applications are all one thing, not two.
Yeah, and the risk if you don't invest in your own services. I was having this conversation the other week on, I think it was one of the other podcasts. If you don't invest as a business, then all of a sudden what you'll end up with is a load of shadow AI tools where you've got, the sales team are using a bit of ChatGPT and a bit of Perplexity. Then the project management team is using a bit of Copilot and a bit of this and a bit of that. And actually you end up with all these shadow systems that are actually outside of your control and outside of your ecosystem, because the user, the employee, the worker wants to have the power. And if you can't provide them the power as the business, then they're going to go out and pull in different platforms themselves to try and help, increase their own productivity, aren't they? So it's almost a catch-22 in that you've got to get to a point where you're at least giving some investment and some power back to the employee, to your teams. Otherwise, they're going to go off and have all these shadow systems working in the background themselves, because it's so easy just to, go and get a plus license on ChatGPT and actually get quite a lot of power out of it.
Exactly that. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, the demands on software engineers are going to be really, really high, because the benchmark's really high at the moment. But I think the tooling is beginning to catch up. We're seeing things like, so we've just embraced this protocol called MCP, or Model Context Protocol, and it's a fantastic abstraction to let agents talk to each other, so that things aren't so bespoke anymore. So it's things like this where I think open standards haven't really emerged, but yet you still had all the vendors, so everybody's going, oh my God, this is such a huge landscape. What do I do? In large part, when you have like programming models and protocols and stuff, it doesn't necessarily matter, because you just put something in the middle of two vendors and somehow they can talk. So I think it's taken a while. It's taken a good couple of years for the market to keep pace with that and understand that. But MCP was released by Anthropic. Microsoft have embraced it. Google have embraced it. So I think that the tooling is catching up with a lot of what business wants now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess alongside the sort of the journey and development on the technology side of things, as you sort of weave through the journey with Elastacloud, you've ended up moving in and sort of being acquired by Acora. So I guess as the founder alongside Andy with Elastacloud, I guess, was there anything initially that sort of led to that decision? Was that a goal or a destination that you started working towards? Was it something that came up as just an opportunity out of the blue that was worth exploring? How did that sort of all take shape? Because I think it'd be interesting for other founders to know what that looked like.
Yeah, I think we were actually desperately trying to avoid that. There's a point where you think that you're just going to carry on forever, but the shape of the people change over time, and the company ethos changes. And I think that with Andy and I, it was just exhausting being moving so far away from software that because you had to run finances, you've got to have operating models when you scale and all of these sorts of things. And so it just, both of us wanted to get back to our roots. And I think you get to a stage where, what you've built is a beautiful thing, but you're a little bit distant from it day to day because you're not involved in doing all the cool things that other people are doing. Yeah. And so, Andy decided that he didn't want the era of AI to pass by, and he wanted to be like hands on with all of this. So he's gone off and I think he's in stealth mode at the moment. So, but yeah, I think he's enjoying himself. And then I just wanted to get back to technology. So I wanted to dump all of the things which were difficult for me day to day, but I was just managing, and just focus on all the things that I enjoyed again, get a lot closer to the team, doing pair programming, keeping on the crest of the wave, which, I think the more you grow and the more you scale, the further, you're then dealing with, you're not dealing with what's going to be present in the next 6 months or the next 12 months, which I was, 4 or 5 years ago. You're dealing with technology now in exactly the same way as other large businesses. So it really wasn't where I wanted to sit personally.
Yeah, I think from the sounds of your career history, it's technology first and a techie at heart, right? And you get to a point where you've grown a business that's successful, but you end up probably much more embedded in the business and operational side of the organization rather than the bit that you're really passionate about, which is being involved on the technology side. So I guess, is that what made sort of Acora feel like a good fit in terms of, a bigger organization that could come in and give support at that sort of more business operational level and be able to take over that sort of side of the business that you wanted to get away from? Yeah,
that's it, exactly. They're a very traditional MSP. I'd known the CEO, Dave Rabson, for about 3.5 years prior, and we used to meet for breakfast every quarter or so, and every time we used to sit down together, they go, "Are you ready to sell? Are you ready to sell? Are you ready to sell?" And it was, you could see every single breakfast meeting, right? Everything was wearing on me a bit more, and then they just caved in. I brought Andy there, and I said, I think this is the right time for us, and this is the right company for us. And some of the things that we're trying to do within Acora, because they've done other acquisitions before around security companies, so they've got an idea of what a knowledge worker is, even though traditionally they've grown quite a large end user support business.
Yeah.
They run managed SOCs and all of these things. So when we came in, it was it was also with a remit to do a digital transformation internally, because they wanted to invest in their processes and scale up and get better and introduce data and AI into their core business, which is something that we've already started doing incredibly effectively. And it's exciting. We're pulling a few Acorans in who, coming from different disciplines and different skill sets to try to relate to what we're doing. But, everybody's been very welcoming, which is great.
Yeah. And without obviously going into the details of the acquisition, what was the process? Was the process harder than you thought it was going to be going into it? Was it actually fairly simple? What was that like?
Oh, it was such a nightmare.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was the amount of. I think it gets worse the bigger you are as well. And for us, we've got offices in 4 different jurisdictions, and so the amount of due diligence that you have to do through this process is really, really extreme. You have to be present all the time. You have to respond in a timely manner. Otherwise, you delay things. So, I mean, during this time, I think I was, my days just didn't end. They were endless. Trying to find documentation that from years and years and years ago that somebody was requesting. It's not something that I want to do again. Maybe I'll get the opportunity to. Who knows? But it's, if you're a founder, you need to understand that when you start this with the lawyers and the due diligence people, it's a huge commitment.
Yeah,
and you might not get to the end.
Well, that's the other thing, isn't it? You could get 95% your way through the process, and for whatever reason, it might not work in reality from either side. So from that sort of giving in at the breakfast meet up to the actual fanfare and it's all done, what was the timeline on that? Can you remember?
It was 9 months.
Yeah.
So we started the process. The actual process was 6 months. We thought that we could get it done in 3, but we couldn't.
It's like Grand Designs, isn't it? When they come on and they're like, it's January 2024. And then Kevin McLeod's like, when are you going to be done? And they're like, we're going to be in by Christmas. It's like, you're not going to be in by Christmas, are you?
Yes. I think one thing that really helped, so Acora had have a chief acquisitions officer, because they've done, I think we were the 5th or the 6th acquisition they've done. And this really helped. I mean, because like every single time we hit a roadblock and we were tearing our hair out because we couldn't find something, or he'd just tell us what to do. And it's, if you're just dealing with your lawyers and another set of lawyers, it's not always obvious.
So like I said, maybe going into a business, if you are gonna, if you are a founder and looking at exploring acquisition, maybe someone that, like you say, has been through it before and has got people in the teams that know what's happening, whereas maybe feels a little bit riskier if you're the first acquisition for a business, you're going to have to learn everything as they're learning it as the acquirer as well, potentially.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So.
Yeah. Cool. And I guess now that you're sort of in the Acora world, what's the sort of the plan for the old Elastacloud business unit over the next few years? It's going to start sort of embedding in and working with, Acora customers in that sort of more mid-market around data and AI. What's that sort of plan look like?
Yeah, so we've already started that journey with Acora. They're very strong in the mid-market. So, primarily high marginal revenue earning companies. So fewer people, up to say 5,000 odd people. Whereas our experience is more enterprise.
Yeah.
So this has been quite a change in pace for us, because we've been dealing with fairly large IT teams within a lot of our customers, and now Acora's traditional customer base is quite like smaller teams, and they're not so well defined on their processes, so we literally have to help them from A to Z rather than, P to Z, so to speak.
Yeah. Cool. Well, sounds like an exciting time ahead, and like you say, a journey that's been through lots of different guises, but at the heart of it has always been being excited and being super interested with the tech, and that's where you've got yourself back to now, which is back at that sort of leading edge of Microsoft technologies, isn't it? So
yeah, I'm looking forward to the future. I think that things are moving really, really quickly at the moment, and just want to keep on top of it.
Yeah. I mean, we thought it was interesting what you were saying about that inflection point of Azure in sort of 2015, 2016. So my journey in helping businesses hire Azure skills started at the end of 2016. And if I think about the arc of skills in the UK when it comes to Azure and how that's changed, in 2016, 2017, when I started, it was like, if someone's done a migration into Azure lift and shift, great. If they've heard of ARM templates, hire them. You know what I mean? And then you start to get to where we're at now, in a much more mature skills market in the UK. And I think those foundational skills around Azure infrastructure and platform are a lot more mature. But where there are still real big challenges are in the more sort of specialist skills, whether that's data platform side of it, AI side of it, security, so those sort of niches within Azure, because ultimately Azure has now become, infrastructure effectively, or IT in effect. For businesses all in on a public cloud provider, that is their IT estate effectively, and now it's back to sort of those specialist pillars within it that we always used to have, which was data, security, infrastructure, and platform, right? And obviously apps and development. So yeah, it's interesting how that journey sort of is similar to what I've seen over the past few years. So Richard, I always like to end the podcast with Microsoft Mentors Quickfire round. So based on the tweet performance at the start, we'll see how we get on, but they're not as hard as that one. That was a hard one. So I always like this question. What's your favourite Microsoft technology or product of all time?
So it's still the same, even though it's a little bit outdated now. But I used to love Azure Stream Analytics. I think it was one of Microsoft's most best and underrated services at the time.
Yeah, nice. When it comes to sort of people's approach to cloud technologies, are you an advocate for all in cloud or hybrid?
All in.
Yeah, cool. From a personal perspective, is there a piece of career advice that someone's given you that you've always remembered and think, actually, that's made a big difference to my career?
Yes. It was actually my father who said, when I veered away from what I'm good at, he went, "Stop doing that," and it's led me into a successful place. And he always did that every single time. I thought, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try this, and I stopped walking on my path. I remembered that.
Yeah, absolutely. Outside of sort of the pure techie side of things, as you were growing Elastacloud and now with Acora as you're growing, is there a trait or an attribute that you look for in people when you're sort of looking to hire them outside of technology, personal attribute, an approach, a mindset?
I've literally lived this for like the last 15 years or so. So all of my focus has been around technology. So I'm gonna tell you that anybody that goes to a community event, I think for me is like an instant hire, because I having that passion, which not everybody does, to give up their own time, and build their own learning, I think is so important, and it's getting more and more unique in a world where I think our Gen Z culture is more instant gratification rather than hard graft. So I still respect the hard graft.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to operating systems, as in laptop operating systems, are you going to be a Microsoft mentor and be all in on Windows, or you're a Mac traitor?
I guess I'm a traitor. I flip between Macs and Windows. I can do everything now that I need to on OS X, but I just love being so close to a terminal. Yeah. So
yeah. And final question: if you hadn't ended up working in tech, what do you think you would have been doing instead?
I would hopefully been designing the Starship Enterprise.
I like it. Yeah. Cool. Well, really appreciate your time, Richard. As I say, when the podcast goes out, I'll make sure that Richard and Acora and Elastacloud are all tagged up so everyone can go and find him. Please reach out to him. I'm sure with his background in the community, if anyone's ever looking to chat about anything that we've spoken about, feel free to reach out to Richard. But yeah, thanks for your time and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks for inviting me, Ollie. That's great.
No problem.